What's good, Deck Gang? The top story this week is all about how we now have new data that unequivocally proves developers cannot ignore the Steam Deck. And technically, this data has been under our noses for a couple of months now. You know, there are always arguments and speculation about how many units the Steam Deck has sold, and if you compare that to traditional consoles, maybe that number doesn't seem extremely impressive. Or you can look at the monthly hardware survey and see that Linux only makes up 2% of the Steam player base and come to the conclusion that Steam Deck doesn't mean that much in the grand scheme of things. But the data I'm going to show you today shows that owners of Steam Deck contribute to the success of some games more than you might otherwise think. It's actually pretty incredible to see where the Steam Deck is having the most impact and how much Steam Deck players really play their games. I think this really is only just the beginning of the PC handheld era, but I can't wait to hear what you think when you see this data. By the way, folks, my name is Rich. This is my weekly Deck News Roundup, where I bring you the latest news around Steam Deck, other PC handhelds, and PC gaming at large. There are chapters for everything, so let's go ahead and get started with that first story. Shall we? So the data that has been under our noses this entire time is actually Steam user review data. And I want to thank Mosquito on the Fan to Deck Discord for pointing this data out. You may recall that 2 months back, Valve added a new Steam Deck icon to Steam user reviews, and that was to indicate when a customer review was written by someone who was primarily playing on the Steam Deck. This was just one of the tools that Valve developed to make it easier to see how Steam Deck players were reviewing their games. Additionally, they made it so that you can filter reviews in the same way. So just like you can filter by negative reviews and positive reviews, or you can filter within a certain date range, you can also filter by people that play primarily on deck. In this case, primarily just means over half of their playtime was spent on the Steam Deck. Based on that, we can actually see the percentages of reviews that were left by people that preferred to play any given game on Steam Deck, and there are some really interesting findings. First, let's take a look at a recent release with Metaphor ReFantazio. This is currently the #1 played game on deck, so you have to wonder how many reviews were left by Steam Deck players. And at the time of writing, there were approximately 3,300 English language reviews, and of those, approximately 150 of them have that Steam Deck icon. That means that Steam Deck players make up for 4.5% of the reviews for Metaphor, which is incredible. Never before in perhaps the entire history of PC gaming have developers been able to point to a single configuration of RAM, CPU, GPU, max resolution, and say that a 20th of the player base is going to be using exactly that. But of course, this is just one game. Next, let's look at Balatro. Balatro is a game that feels like it was specifically made for the Steam Deck. It would have been popular regardless, but to many people, it at least feels like some amount of that support is carried by the fact that you can play this game on a handheld rather easily. To that end, it's been in the top 10 played games on deck ever since it came out in February. So we took a look at the numbers for that game, and it turns out 8% of all English language reviews come from people that have spent over 50% of their Balatro playtime on the deck specifically. Now, I am primarily looking at English language because I think that is a little more representative of the regions that can actually buy a Steam Deck today. Even then, there are plenty of people leaving reviews in English that can't officially buy a Steam Deck. Still, I was curious to see what was the percentage of all language reviews that came from a Steam Deck player, and for Balatro, that number goes down to 6%. That is, of course, lower than the English language only, but again, it is remarkable that even across all languages, you can have that significant of a player base on a single configuration of hardware. A couple other games that had a remarkable percentage of Steam Deck reviews were Hades 2 with 4.6% and Diablo 4 with 6.9%. Nice. There's no way I would have expected that 7% of Diablo 4 Steam players were playing on Steam Deck. Also, Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 plus 2.5 Remix has over 10% of reviews coming from the Steam Deck. That is incredible. Also, 9.7% of Animal Well, 16.8% of Plucky Squire, and a whopping 19.9% of UFO 50 players are on the Steam Deck. All of the games I'm talking about so far came out relatively recently, and if you look at older games, you can expect this number to be much lower. Stardew Valley is the #2 top played Steam Deck game, but only 0.2% of players are on the Steam Deck. If you filter the same game to reviews that were left in the last year or since October 1st, 2023, then the number jumps to 1.1%. If you filter further to reviews that were left in the last 30 to 60 days, that number goes up to 1.6%. Likewise, although Baldur's Gate 3 came out after the Steam Deck was released, it was in early access for a long time, and that potentially contributes to the fact that only 0.9% of players are on Steam Deck. But the other thing that contributes here for both Baldur's Gate 3 and Stardew Valley is that these games have sold a metric ton of copies, millions and millions of copies sold, and so the player base becomes a lot more diverse. Likewise, Wukong is the #9 most played game on deck, but it's also sold over 10 million copies, and perhaps as a result, 0.5% of English language reviews were left by Steam Deck players. The flip side to that is that there are games that have sold a lot fewer copies, and a much larger percentage of their play base is on Steam Deck, often even when they're not the top played Steam Deck games. Grapple Dog comes in at 10%, and its sequel gets all the way to 25%. I think there are 3 pieces of important context here. First is that once again, this icon only shows up when over half of the reviewer's playtime was on Steam Deck. Second, it is really hard to write a review on the Steam Deck compared to a desktop or laptop. And third, the Steam Deck is only 2.5 years old. For some people, it's a companion device, and for others, it's a primary device. But the more recent you go, the higher the percentage of reviews that were left by Steam Deck users. Makes sense, right? The more time goes on, the more Steam Decks there are in people's hands. But I would say it's not just that, because we're talking about percentages here, so that means that the Steam Deck number is growing faster than the overall PC number. Steam Deck represents a huge vector of growth for not only Valve, but also for game developers. Naturally, these numbers may or may not be proportional to units sold for a given game, but I think it's indicative of an active player base. Steam Deck players are engaged Steam users, and they're actively playing video games. This may also mean that they have a higher propensity to buy games, but that data point is a little out of reach, I would say, so I'll leave that as something for you to interpret how you see fit. Still though, I think that one thing is for sure, this data shows that developers just simply cannot ignore the Steam Deck. For smaller games, it's a system that can make up as much as 20% of your player base, and even for a game as large as Diablo 4, you can see that 6.9% of Steam players are playing on Steam Deck. In all of Blizzard's years, I just can't imagine that they could have ever pointed to a single configuration of hardware and say 7% of our player base is going to be using exactly this. That is insane. Guys, this Steam Deck community is absolutely amazing. You know I love to promote homebrew projects and of course different content creators, and honestly everyone I've spoken to has been incredibly kind, gracious, and most of all they wear their passion on their sleeve. Today I want to tell you about something special because Jimmy Champagne from Deck Ready has just started a new channel. It's called Real Ones, and in it he tells stories about horror movie directors that you've 100% never heard before. Jimmy is doing incredible research for each video, and I'm truly blown away by some of what he's uncovered. Like, did you know Evil Dead was partially funded through bank fraud? Or that Kanye West is the reason we have Alien Romulus? Or that the original cast of the Blair Witch Project was only paid a grand total of $10,000 and then they lost the rights to their name and likeness? In fact, the first video is all about why John Carpenter doesn't look back fondly on his career despite being the master of horror and creating a billion-dollar franchise with Halloween. Listen, Jimmy is passionate about Steam Deck, he's passionate about PlayStation, but nothing gets him going like horror movies, and it's really amazing to see what he's creating with this, which is why I wanted to share it with all of you. Definitely check out Real Ones, even if you only have a passing interest in horror movies, but especially if you're a big fan. Follow my links in the description, and please show Jimmy some love. So what game news should you be aware of for your Steam Deck or PC in general? Well, quite a few actually, starting with the biggest one. Spider-Man 2 has been confirmed for PC and it's coming January 30th, 2025. Mind you, I'm not expecting this to play well on deck, but I'm curious to see how it's going to run on the LIX, not to mention future PC handhelds and of course my desktop. Notably, this is the fastest PlayStation port to PC yet, at least if we're not counting live service games and remasters. Spider-Man didn't show up on PC for 4 years, Miles Morales took 2 years, but Spider-Man 2 is coming to PC only 15 months after the PS5 release. If you exclude remasters like Until Dawn and The Last of Us, and you exclude live service games like Helldivers, this is by far the fastest port from PlayStation to PC, and here is a chart that shows that this has been the trend since the beginning. Since Sony's first big port over 4 years ago, the average delay to PC has been cut down by a third. Based off this, many people have come to the conclusion that day and date releases on PC are inevitable, and at this rate, it's hard to blame them. Speaking of Sony games, Concord has actually been getting updates behind the scenes on Steam. Despite being taken down on September 6th, Concord has been getting updates since September 30th. These updates are visible on the Steam data mining site SteamDB, and according to PC Gamer, the pace of these updates have been approximately half a dozen per day until October 10th. The depots being modified have names like PM Test and Sony QAE. It's unclear what exactly is going on, but it seems likely that Concord will in fact make a return to Steam sometime in the future. What do you think? On the subject of games coming to Steam, Assassin's Creed Mirage is coming to Steam just 1 year after its debut on Ubisoft Connect. After the disappointing sales of Star Wars Outlaws, Ubisoft has stated that they are bringing back same-day releases to Steam, so it likely won't be long before the entire stable of Ubi games is back on Valve's store. Gaming on Linux reported on this story and pointed out that AC Mirage does use Denuvo and does have a machine activation limit, which is something you want to keep in mind if you're trying different versions of Proton. Additionally, AC Mirage will also make use of the Ubisoft Connect launcher. Finally, as Gaming on Linux points out, although the game hasn't been rated on Steam Deck yet, Ubisoft stated in a post that it will be playable on Steam Deck and that they're working on optimizing the experience for your PC handheld. While we're talking about Ubi games, it should also be noted that Assassin's Creed Valhalla has been updated to add Steam achievements, a Steam feature that is incredibly welcome. The game did already have achievements, but they were earned on the Ubi Connect platform, and if you've already unlocked achievements there, they'll also be retroactively earned on Steam. Ubi has been pretty notorious for their lack of support for Steam native features, including Steam achievements and Steam cloud saves, likely as a way to push players towards using the features on their own platform. However, perhaps now with the push to day one releases on Steam, it is possible that we'll see a friendlier stance towards these Steam features as well. Another game working to be optimized for your PC handheld is Dragon Age: The Veilguard. The team over at BioWare has expressed that this game will be Steam Deck verified, and we finally have some system requirements that may help us predict whether or not this is actually true. This comes courtesy of a new post from BioWare, who revealed somewhat modest PC requirements. The minimum specs call for an i5-8400, 16GB of RAM, and a GTX 970. With that, you should be able to get 1080p and 30fps on a low preset, though this performance does include the use of optional upscaling. They also point out at the end of the blog post that they're happy to remind you that Dragon Age: The Veilguard is fully Steam native and Steam Deck verified. Although the system requirements here are relatively modest, as I said, Steam Deck HQ importantly calls out the 16GB RAM requirement, specifically stating that this has been a problem for games in the past, like Black Myth Wukong, which would completely crash the system and require a reboot. Hopefully that doesn't end up being the case for Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Tetris Forever also has a release date now. This game is landing on Steam on November 12th. You might recall that it was announced in a Nintendo Direct stream in late August, and it's a compilation of classic Tetris titles, including the original on the Electronica 60 computer. There's also Tetris 2, Sparkless, Bombless, and the multiplayer Tetris Battle Gaiden. This game is being developed by Digital Eclipse, who has published a number of great retro compilations, including The Making of Karateka, Atari 50, and the Disney Afternoon Collection. Moving to Steam Deck Homebrew news, the store page for Junk Store has officially been removed. You may recall I reported last week that Junk Store is a custom plugin that makes it easier to install games from Epic Games Store and Good Old Games on your Steam Deck. Additionally, I reported that they were looking to go official with an application that you can buy and install from Steam directly, just like lossless scaling. It seems, however, that Valve have decided to remove the store page entirely. In a Reddit post, the development team confirmed that this was done by Valve. A message sent to them by Steam support reads, "Our goal is to allow as many products as possible to ship on Steam, but Junk Store includes features that Steam does not support. Specifically, Steam does not officially support applications that modify the Steam client code, behavior, or interface, as they have the potential to be harmful to players and the community. We understand that your goal is to help players and make their experience on Steam better, but we have to consider the potential full impact of that." While this project may have seemed unlikely to actually launch on Steam, the team did say in their original explainer that, quote, "We have very clearly signaled our intent to Valve, and we feel like we just got the quiet nod of approval." I suppose the lesson is that a quiet nod of approval just may not be enough. Naturally, the plugin is still available in case you want to easily install and play non-Steam games on your Steam Deck, so feel free to check that out. One plugin, however, that is no longer available is NonSteamLaunchers. Now, this involves a bit of drama that I couldn't fully wrap my head around, so I'm mostly just going to link to the Gaming on Linux story for this subject. As you can imagine, NonSteamLaunchers serves a similar purpose to Junk Store, where the goal is to install and play non-Steam games from Steam. However, according to this story from Gaming on Linux, the plugin was removed by the team behind Decky Loader after the creator of the plugin allegedly appeared to show continued harassment of members of these communities. They continue to say they, quote, "decided to delist the plugin from our store alongside banning its creator to prevent potential abuse of our community and plugin store," end quote. The developer of NonSteamLaunchers, Roy, made his own statement saying, quote, "I don't believe I said anything racist or wrong to anyone regarding race or color or bigotry of any type or orientation of any kind. I will continue holding this stance and I will not move from it. I still don't really know what I did wrong for my plugin to be taken away so fast," end quote. You can see his full statement as well as the full statement from Decky Loader in the Gaming on Linux article that I will share in the description. Among all the alleged leaks of the Nintendo Switch 2, one of them could be seen as confirmation as to why Ryujinx and Yuzu, not to mention MiG Switch, were aggressively targeted by Nintendo. According to Central Leaks on Twitter, who has been covering the Game Freak Giga Leak, Nintendo is using the same tools and ROM format for the Switch 2 that they used for the Switch 1. Central Leaks adds that Switch 2 will obviously have new encryption keys that only Nintendo has access to. For a while now, we have all been speculating that the architecture of the Nintendo Switch 2 will share a lot in common with its predecessor, and while this leak doesn't speak to architecture specifically, it does speak to development tools. In the event that there's a lot in common between the Switch and its follow-up, it would be unsurprising that Nintendo would target currently known vulnerabilities of the original Switch and that they'd plug those up to the best of their abilities. On the bright side, if this is true, then it's possible that it won't take too long to hack and eventually emulate the next Nintendo Switch. While all of this should be taken with a heavy grain of salt, it is at the very least an interesting turn of events. Steam Next Fest for October 2024 just wrapped up, and I thought I'd tell you about 10 games that you should add to your wishlist, since these were my favorite demos from the Next Fest. Some of these demos are still available, so feel free to check them out. First up is PoppyCom. PoppyCom is a fun co-op adventure where you use match stream mechanics to beat bad guys and solve puzzles. It's adorable and fun as hell, and it shot all the way up to the top of my wishlist. The Precinct was one of the most popular demos of Next Fest, and it's easy to see why. You play as a rookie B-cop fresh out of the academy in a crime-filled sandbox that looks reminiscent of early GTA games. It's a love letter to cop movies, and it lets you choose how you're going to handle crimes, whether they be petty misdemeanors or full-on bank heists and drug deals. Windblown is an action roguelike created by the developers of Dead Cells. It can be played with up to 3 players, and it bears similarities to Hades. It's fast-paced and has an extremely satisfying gameplay loop. It hits early access this week, so definitely check that out. Lightning Katana is a boomer shooter focused on speed running and stylish combos. It's inspired by Hotline Miami, Katana Zero, and Devil May Cry, and you can absolutely tell. It was a blast to run through this demo for fast times and high combos, so see if you can check it out. Jupiter Hell Classic is like Doom, but in a turn-based traditional roguelike format. It still manages to capture the adrenaline of Doom with the atmosphere, but also with the hordes of demons that you'll have to rip and tear through. The emergent gameplay mechanics and different classes are things that are going to keep me coming back for a long time. Antin Blast is a 2D platformer in the vein of Wario Land. It started development around the same time as Pizza Tower, and although these two games may look similar, they each take their Wario Land inspiration in two different directions. Both of them do maintain the pursuit of white knuckle speedruns, but there's more to explore here in Antin Blast if that's more your speed. Each level has nooks and crannies with curious secrets, so it's not all about just going fast. Aribuktu and the Anytime Elevator is a cinematic platformer full of delightful moments. Like other cinematic platformers, it's very much on rails, but that doesn't make the experience devoid of challenge. Each sequence is unique and compelling so far, and I can't wait to see what the full game looks like. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate is yet another Hades-like, but hey, this one has the turtles. You can play as either of the 4 eponymous ninjas, and you can play up to 4-player co-op. It reminded me of playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance with friends, and it's absolutely worth a look. Mandragora is a 2D Souls-like with a lot of personality. The world is rich and the art and animation feel in line with the Ori games. The combat is satisfying, and apparently there are several unique classes to master, so I can't wait to see how they all differentiate from each other as the game goes on. Tenebrous Somnia is a new game from New Blood Interactive. The genre of this game is somewhere between a point-and-click adventure and an NES-style remake of Resident Evil. The atmosphere, the narrative, and the concept all clicked for a gripping tale. I can't wait to see how it all comes together in the final title. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this week's episode. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Deck Gang out. Goodbye.